All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, July 11th, 2022 meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission. We'll go ahead and start with a roll call. Chair Lisa Hanson, present. Vice Chair Jacob Miller.
Present.
Alder Jim Hutchinson.
Present.
Commissioner Sydney Bremer.
Present.
Commissioner Darius Daniels.
I see him.
I see him as well. He's just muted. I'll come back to him. Commissioner Ken Ravinsky.
Present.
And then DJ, are you on audio now? Are you present?
Present.
Right?
Sorry.
Moving on to the approval of the agenda for the July 11th, 2022 meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission.
So move.
Second.
So moved by Alder Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Bremer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and then moving on to the approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes from the June 20th, 2022 meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
So as a motion by Commissioner Ravinsky and a second by Alder Hutchinson, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and then moving on to regular business, and we will start with a public hearing. This public hearing has been properly posted and public notification has been published in the Green Bay Press Gazette. The Plan Commission is interested in hearing public comments on the subject agenda items. We invite your comments and ask that after your name has been called, you state your address, whether you represent a group or association, whether you favor, oppose, or are only providing information in this matter, and your comments or concerns. We ask that you confine your testimony to facts related to the proposal at hand and avoid repetitive testimony. You must be recognized by the Plan Commission in order to speak, and please address your comments to the chair. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. We will now open the public hearing on item number 1. Public hearing on request to rezone portions of the 1000 block of University Avenue and the 500 block of St. George Street from light industrial, neighborhood commercial, varied density residential, and general commercial to public institutional, office residential, and low density residential submitted by the City of Green Bay property owner.
I'll give a brief update before we go into our public hearing here. This area is near Golden House and where the expansion of the East River Trail is going to be happening. So we're probably pretty familiar with this area. We've done 2 applications here recently, but all of the parcels are outlined here. So the ones that are impacted are all city owned aside from 1 residential lot here, which is currently zone C1. So we're adding that in as part of our request. And owners have been notified of that. But the rest of them will just be following the new parcel lines that's under a new CSM to create that new expansion of the East River Trail to go along this portion here. And then 2 lots that'll be for disposition for the redevelopment authority.
Okay, thank you, Steph. So now with the public hearing, we're looking to hear from people who are in favor, in opposition, or are looking to provide information only. So if you can just state your name and address for the record. And if you're calling it on internet audio, it is *6 to unmute yourself. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Let the record reflect that no one came forward and this public hearing is now closed. Moving on to the corresponding actionable item, item number 2, consideration with possible action on request to rezone portions of the 1000 block of University Avenue and 500 block of St. George Street from light industrial, neighborhood commercial, varied density residential, and general commercial to public institutional, office residential, and low-density residential submitted by the City of Green Bay property owner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, this is the location that we're talking about, Webster Avenue here, University Avenue here. Golden House campus is located on this parcel for a landmark. And then this is St. George Street, which is mainly a residential street on the east side. This is the new CSM that will be kind of determining some of these property lines. So this is pretty close to being done, but not quite done yet. It should be completed by the time that this goes through City Council for final approval, but we are using these legal descriptions for those parcel lines. So in effect, the zoning will line up with these parcels once the CSM is recorded and complete. So these are the boundaries that we're looking at here. Most notably, Outlot 1 will be that continuation of the East River Trail. Lot 1 will be zoned OR for disposition to the RDA for redevelopment. And Lot 2 will remain a residential lot. It is currently vacant, so the RDA will also be in charge of redeveloping that piece of the puzzle. So overall, this is how the zoning map looks now. A little bit of NC here. There's some conservancy here. And then the majority of it is already PI. So this whole thing will be PI brought down throughout this area. A lot of industrial zoning to the south part of this area. And then this is that parcel, that residential parcel that we do not own. We have alerted that property owner. I have not heard from them, so I'm assuming that they are not opposed to that action. Single family homes, which is what exists there, are not allowed within our C1 district. So right now it's a non-conformity. Rezoning this to R1 not only matches what's going on with the rest of this neighborhood, but brings that property into further conformity. So we're figuring this is all basically just one large cleanup action. And then the Golden House campus is zoned office residential, and the lot 2, which is going to be created here, will be that expansion of that OR district. So looking for similar or complementary uses there. So again, showing over here kind of what that looks like. A lot cleaner, things make a lot more sense, things will follow the property lines. So with that, we are recommending approval.
Okay, thank you so much, Steph. Go ahead, Commissioner Bremer.
I do have one question. Steph, I noticed that the utility easement page noted that the developers would have the right to cut down any trees without any kind of replacement. Can you say a little bit about the reason for not requiring some kind of replacement?
I think that'd be part of our land division process. So I'm not really sure. We are the property owner, so it'd be city owned. I mean, obviously our parks department isn't going to leave our entire area unlandscaped. There will be landscape buffers that are required between specific uses anyway. But as far as the trail is concerned, I'm assuming that they need to cut down trees for the trail area.
It wasn't the trail area though. It's that utility easement at the north edge.
Of which parcel?
It runs along several of the parcels.
Yeah, it's mainly over the new lot 1, I believe. Runs
Yeah.
along the frontage.
Well,
and I can take go ahead, Steph.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I could take a shot at it. It's primarily because it is a utility easement. And if they need to remove the material as part of that easement, they could. But like Steph had said, any new development that happens on that lot 1 will have landscape requirements when it's redeveloped. And if I'm wrong, Stephanie, correct me.
Nope, that is correct. Utility easement in place.
Sorry to jump in.
Awesome. What a team. Thank you all.
Yep.
Then I move approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Bremer, a second by Commissioner Ravinsky. Is there any further discussion amongst the commission or any questions for staff? All right. I see the head shake, so I'll go ahead then with a voice vote. Oh, wait a second. I'd like to repeat now I've forgotten who made the motion and who seconded it. Thank you. Commissioner Ravinsky, second by Commissioner Bremer, or no, motion by Commissioner Bremer, second by Commissioner Ravinsky to approve as
Stated.
all those in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and then that will go on to the next city council meeting. Is that the 19th?
Actually, there's not another city council meeting here in July. I don't believe the next council meeting will be until August 2nd, I believe.
Oh,
Yes,
right.
that
Correct.
first reading, August 2nd, last reading, August 30th.
all right, so August 2nd. Okay, thank you very much. All right, and moving on to item number 3, public hearing on request to rezone 3164 Finger Road from low-density residential and rural residential to general commercial, submitted by Joel Erfurth, Mach 4 Engineering, on behalf of Early Childcare 2 LLC, Jokey Family Farm LLC property owner.
Okay, I will quickly give a background on this one as well. Property is 3164 Finger Road, so located here. This is along East Mason, where it does that large curve out on the far east side of town. Just below is I-43 Business Park, and then Finger Road to the north, which is mainly residential, 1 and 2 families. It is currently have that split zoning, which looks like this, for no good reason, realistically. They are proposing C1 over the whole of the lot for some future development, which we'll discuss further in the action item.
Okay, thank you, Steph. And then we're looking for any parties who are looking to speak on this in favor, in opposition, or providing information only. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Let the record reflect that no one has come forward and this public hearing is now closed. Moving on to the actionable item, item number 4, consideration with possible action on request to rezone 3164 Finger Road from low density residential and rural residential to general commercial, submitted by Joel Erfurth, Mach 4 Engineering, on behalf of Early Childcare 2 LLC, Jokey Family Farm LLC property owner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, property located here. We're looking at the corner. This is Ontario that's cut through here, and then there is no cut through portion of roadway at this time on the east side of this development. Future land use calls for commercial zoning and uses within this district. And again, that zoning, mostly R3, very density up top, and then a little bit of RR left over. I believe that this parcel previously had a PUD over it, which is why the zoning probably never got cleaned up. The PUD expired, so now it still looks like this. Right now, what is happening on here, I believe, is this is a small farmette, and then this is all farm fields. So it's a very vacant lot at this point. What is being proposed at this time is a coffee drive-through facility at the corner of Ontario and Finger, located here, and then a daycare facility right next to that, that's right off the corner. So these two have been, C1 zoning is being brought forward because it best accommodates those two uses on this portion. But from there, for the rest of the property, which the whole of the property is about 12 acres, so it's a fairly large piece of property, they don't really have a great idea of what they'll be doing with the rest of this piece. There are talks of pulling this road down here to connect through to Mason Street, which we are in support of. They still have to do wetland delineations, do some talk between property owners, so that may not occur, in which case they've said maybe here, do some sort of a driveway more off center. Either way, showing some fairly large lots being created. So while we find that the C1 is certainly an appropriate district when it's abutting our business park, you know, we want something that has more of a commercial feel along East Mason Street. It's a little bit more of a question mark along Finger Road. C1 does have some appropriate uses, as exemplified here with the cafe and a daycare facility that would be more sensitive to the neighborhood to the north. However, there are some things that can occur in C1 that aren't very great as neighbors. So while we understand the need for C1 zoning across the skinnier portion of this parcel today, and possibly along, you know, East Mason Street as that gets developed further, until we have more information about how many lots there would be, will a road go through, will everything be coming off of Finger Road, staff found it most appropriate to do some sort of a buffer here. I mean, you guys typically know we don't like to do split zoning on a lot, but considering the fact that this is a 12-acre lot, and we don't really know what's going to happen with the infrastructure going forward, this is the best way that we can buffer and protect the neighborhood to the north at this point. So it is currently zoned R3. That may not be the ideal zoning district here. I'm actually assuming that maybe ORNC might be more appropriate for the type of uses, you know, something that's commercial but has a lighter footprint, not as much traffic. So without knowing what may go into this portion, we're recommending a 200-foot buffer. I'm using this as a general guide. It appears as if that is where this line is. So they have the daycare and the coffee. It would be here and here. And then from there, 200 feet deep, just kind of hold this area in an R3. So that way anything that would be in the C1 would not be allowed to go here without a rezoning and further lot division. And then the remaining of the parcel to be zoned C1 at this time. I have talked to a couple of the neighbors out there. I think that they were most concerned to see what kind of development would be occurring. They didn't seem supportive or opposed to the C1 zoning. They mostly were very vocal about not wanting an apartment complex to be located along Finger Road. In this instance, both C1 and R3 do allow for apartment buildings. However, I don't believe that the applicant or the property owner is interested in doing any sort of multifamily at this point. So it's kind of a big question mark, which is why we feel that this may be the most appropriate, though we are open for conversation and some amendments here if you find that there is a more appropriate way to kind of do some protection along Finger Road here. So with that, we are recommending approval of the request to rezone the parcel to general commercial aside from a 200-foot buffer along Finger Road, which will remain very density residential.
Okay, thank you, Steph. Go ahead, Alder Hutchinson.
This is my district. This is within my district, and I received 3 emails from constituents. 2 wanted further information because they received letters last week, and staff supplied information that I was able to either forward on or get it directly to them. I believe they're satisfied. The third individual stated concerns of traffic going into the coffee shop. And I believe, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but we have to be careful of the traffic patterns that may be established. And I think there'll be ample time for review by staff as to where driveways go. But I think what's being hinted at anyway from staff is something akin to Uncle Mike's, where people drive and they drive the whole length of the short road and then turn right and go into the property. But that's neither here nor there yet. But that's the one concern that I heard about. And then the other concern was extending the street south, Welland. I think the individual lived on Welland and they were a little bit concerned of if that street's extended. And that was the extent of comments that I've received.
All right, thank you. So Steph, I guess the applicant right now, what they have in mind is a coffee shop and a daycare. They don't have any other plans for the rest of it.
Yes, as far as I know.
Are those plans firm?
We have not received any site plans for them. I imagine they wanted to get the rezoning done prior to that, but we don't have any site plans submitted to share. And again, for rezonings, we have to think of this as everything that's in C1 would be possible. Just because they say it will be a cafe and a childcare center, that doesn't mean that it will be. So which is why we only did it for more of that interior piece of the lot, that buffer, because usually things that are on corners or have that short double frontage, you know, there's the anticipation of a little bit more traffic, and it's a lot easier to do a site plan that's more conducive to neighborhood support versus large chunks that are mid-block. So I don't want to get too hung up on what uses they're proposing because those could change in an instant. So it's just anything that would be allowed in C1 would be something that would be allowed here with that rezoning.
And would you remind us of the range of things that could be there right across the street from all of those residential homes? Because I had the same reaction that you all did, that daycare and coffee shop sounds really ideal. But
yes. So generally in C1, it's a lot of office, like personal service sort of things that are allowed, but they also allow bed and breakfast. Restaurants with a drive-through require conditional use, so at least there's some protection there, but restaurants are permitted if they don't have a drive-through. A lot of personal service, a lot of things that you would find in a neighborhood. So a vet, a grooming place for your pet, a hair place, like those sorts of uses. And then as far as any sort of like production, auto things, almost all of them require a conditional use permit in C1. So it would mostly be things with the like multifamily is allowed as long as there's something on the ground floor. Restaurants, those tend to have a high traffic volume depending on what kind it is. I think those are the biggest ones.
Thank you.
Well, and this feels fairly appropriate being on the corridor of Mason there too, to be changing that to C1.
Certainly. So from there, it's the question of access. Where is the access coming to for these future lots?
Did you have a question, Commissioner Daniels?
I did. Steph, with this type of split zoning, is this, would this be an exception or would this be something we've done in the past?
We've done this in the past. Sometimes we call it spike zoning, you know, strip zoning. It kind of depends on what the intentions are.
The Little Caesars on Lombardi is the one that comes to my mind right away, that little strip.
Yes, sometimes they're used between districts as some sort of an extension of a buffer. We're kind of out of the practice of that these days. Generally speaking, we see this on larger lots like this, where it's maybe it's in need of a land division. It needs to be divided to be more appropriate for the things like this one. The top half faces a neighborhood and the bottom half is facing a business park that's mostly industrial. Very different needs for both of those pieces of the puzzle. So it's not unheard of. It doesn't need any sort of special recommendation, and also wouldn't set any sort of standard because we have used these as needed.
Awesome, thank you.
Are there any more questions amongst, or for staff, or any discussion amongst the commission?
Yeah, just one. The street extension that they were looking for, I must have missed it. Was that preferred by staff or just no comment at this point?
Maybe it depends what staff you're asking. Probably preferred by our staff upstairs. We like to see those kind of connections, and East Mason has very limited spaces in which you can do ingress and egress. I'm not sure if DPW has even looked at something like this before. Neil popped on, so I'm thinking that maybe they did. I'll let him give our opinion.
Just a quick brief on that one, Jake. The DPW has looked at, they were actually in discussions with the owner about, obviously the trick is the making a safe connection back down to the road to the south because of the strange angle. So there would need to be some work either work with the adjacent property owner to swing that road out to provide a little bit more of a squared up access point, or I think actually Director Grenier had actually mentioned the ability to maybe do a slip lane. If they kept it right on the property line to actually do a turn to kind of allow that to occur safely all on the one property. So he was certainly at least willing to discuss options in the meeting that we had. So I think there's probably would be some level of interest of seeing that connection from DPW as well as from our staff.
Got it. That's all I was wondering. Thank you for that.
Steph, I do have one last question. So if this is approved this evening, would they have to come back for a CUP in the future or no?
It depends what the uses would be. So right now, if anything that would be allowed in C1, they could do within that area that we zone C1. Anything that's in R3 would have to be allowed in R3. If they come back with a different type of commercial proposal in that area that we retain as R3, it would just go through a rezoning process. And with that, they would probably have a land division with it. So I think that's kind of the goal, is to, we don't love to do things off of property lines, but at least here it gives us a little bit more protection to wait to see what they come up with.
Okay, great. Makes sense. Thank you.
Steph,
Yes.
the R3 zoning, is there another zoning that had been discussed that also may be appropriate there? Something that would protect against the apartment buildings?
Staff isn't really convinced that R3 is the appropriate zoning district. We think that maybe OR or NC, depending on the type of use that would go there. They just have very different floor area ratios, but they kind of have the same intention in mind, that they have less commercial, less service-based things that are more far more appropriate next to a neighborhood. Like most of downtown is zoned OR, so it gives you that blend of like, you could have residential or you could have something that's appropriate for a neighborhood. So we just weren't really ready to give a recommendation to change the zoning of that location because we weren't sure what was going to come and if we would need to do another rezoning of that anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Since Alder Hutchison represents that district, I'd like to hear your opinion of this, if you'd be so kind.
The response that I've gotten has been pretty much neutral from constituents. They just kind of wanted to know what we could say at this point in time. I think once things get more concrete, of course, it'll be a little bit more decision time, I think, on constituent part and our part. I think right now, I don't have a sense that there's an overwhelming dislike for this rezoning at this point. Having driven through there, I do know if things are going to go as proposed, there's going to be some need to thoroughly vet the traffic situation. So I think there'll be some discussions between the city and the owner before a final design would go through.
And that would be part of our standard site plan process. Once those businesses do submit for a site plan, there's a traffic review with that.
Right. That's what I called staff specifically about that because I wanted to make sure there was a kick at that cat, and there is. So I that made me feel a little better when I found that out.
Madam Chair, I noticed that there's a hand up on somebody in the audience. I wonder if we should have a motion to open the floor.
Yeah, I saw.
I will move that.
Okay.
I'll second.
Sorry, motion by Commissioner Bremer. Was that Alder Hutchinson that seconded that? Okay. To open the floor, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and then if the person with their hand raised could just state their name and address for the record, and if you're calling in on internet audio, it's star. I just lost the person now. Star 6 to unmute yourself.
Sure thing. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Thanks. My name is Chris Hanold, a resident at 613 Welland Avenue. I would just say in terms of awareness of this, there's a bulk of the neighborhood that just became aware of this probably less than 4 hours ago. That being part of the McCullough Facebook group, there seemed to be a large portion that were particularly negative about it. And just to note on Finger Road, 95% of those within the 200 feet that would be notified are, or 90% are duplex, not necessarily residential, family, whatever it may be. So I think possibility of having some type of more discussions or more feedback from the community until making a final decision would be a very appreciated thing.
Thank you very much for your feedback. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this? As long as we have the floor open.
I'd make a motion to close the floor.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Ravinsky, second by Commissioner Bremer to close the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So now, Steph, I do have a question for you about notification, because I know as a landlord, when there's things that happen, and I have a property over in the shipyard area, so I know that I get notification. Do we send them out to the property owners and the tenants, or what, I guess, what protocol do you follow for that?
No, we only send to property owners. We do not get supplied tenant information or how many, I mean, we can generally figure how many units, but we are not provided with that information. Within the letters, it does detail that if it is a landlord to share the information with the tenants. And also the properties along Finger Road, a lot of those duplexes are zero lot line duplexes, meaning that each side is owned by the tenant or owned by somebody. So they're not necessarily like a rental and each side has its own quite a few of them are split by ownership. So we can't always guarantee that we're getting to the person living there, but we are at least doing our due diligence to say, hey, if you don't live here, give it to the person who does. So
we are sending it to the property owners then.
yes.
Okay. Perfect. That was what I wanted to know. Thank you.
And how long ago would that have gone out?
2 weeks, 10 days. I think we do our letters 10 days before, 200-foot notification area.
Thank you.
So I'm inclined to approve this with the change from the R3 to either NC or OR. Steph, which one gives more protection between the OR, the NC?
Depends where you're trying to protect from. I would say OR is probably more suited, but along Finger Road, we have done NC before. However, that does have a far more intense floor area ratio. So it's meant for denser development, which does not happen typically on the east side. You know, we had a really hard time with Uncle Mike's even, which is a fairly small lot. And these lots are already proposed at a very large scale. So I'm guessing that the floor area ratio for the office residential would be far more suburban in nature. You know, if we're looking for things that just have a little bit more breathing room. I don't know if Dave has an opinion. We've only talked about it briefly as staff between those two districts.
Yeah, my opinion is exactly the same, that OR is less intense, will have more green space. But as Steph had alluded to before, they both allow multifamily in them currently. The current zoning also allows multi. So, you know, just throw that out there.
And we're not opposed to multi necessarily as staff. We just wanted to note that if we did get some negative feedback, it was that people did not want an apartment complex across the street from them. But that doesn't mean that it isn't a good use there. So just to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think I want to just
Yeah,
bounce off
so
that.
Ken, really the big difference you're gonna have there with NC, you're gonna end up with smaller lots and more lot coverage. OR can have a little bit larger lots, although that's not prescribed by code as a minimum, but just because of function. And you could have smaller buildings with more lot area. Does it make sense? They're not drastically different. One is 0.3 and one is 0.5 for FAR, but yeah.
So then Commissioner Ravinsky, was that a motion or are you doing an inquiry?
It was alluding to a motion with an inquiry, but I would make that motion to approve this, changing the R3 to an OR.
And I would second that. If that's appropriate, Chair Hanson.
No, we're talking about that section of land that we were trying to buffer. That's what we're talking about as far as the R3, correct? I'm looking at the agenda and I'm not seeing the R3 where it's coming in.
Correct.
Just change something and that's what I'm trying to figure out.
So the R3 is already there.
Okay. Oh, I see.
Current zoning, yeah.
Okay.
And then as an amendment, we need to vote on that.
Okay.
So can we take that as one motion
Yes.
with the amendment? Okay, that is my motion then.
And I still second that motion with the amendment.
All right. So we've got the motion by Commissioner Ravinsky and a second by Commissioner Daniels. Is there any further discussion amongst the commission?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Lisa, sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
What I'm struggling with is what are we trying to protect against? Because changing it from R3 to OR or NC doesn't really, multifamily is still available in either of those. So it doesn't seem like we have a good idea what we're trying to protect against, and we just kind of want to tinker. So I just want to know, what are we actually trying to do here versus just whatever? Because this neighborhood is now interested and is going to be paying attention to this. So I think we need to put a little more thought into it than, of what we're actually trying to protect them against, or at least provide instruction to staff and the neighborhood about what we think are good uses here, because I bet you take a couple different polling of staff, some would agree that a multifamily residential probably is a good use for this area. So I think we just need to, I'm okay if we vote on this, but we need to give a little better direction to staff and this neighborhood on what we actually want to see in this versus just OR. I guess that covers most of it, even though it gives the same intensity of R3. So I just want to have a little better idea of what we're pushing back to staff.
Well, just to also clarify on the difference between C1 and OR, there are a lot less office uses and commercial uses allowed within OR. So the tables for those two are significantly different in like the service businesses. Like for instance, like laundromats aren't allowed in OR, but they could be allowed in C1. So it's like those kind of uses that get pulled out as you go to OR. So that's basically, you know, goes as far as intensities, it's C3, 2, 1, NC, OR, and then into our residential districts. So that's, I mean, it's a buffer district for a reason. We use it as a buffer throughout the city. So it's realistically what that protection would be.
And there's also a little difference between OR and NC in that OR does not permit drive-through facilities, drive-through restaurants, even with a conditional use, where NC would allow them. So, I mean, there's a little bit different. I think from a staff standpoint, to change it on the fly to a different commercial district, just from our standpoint, we have not had those conversations internally. So to look through the tables comprehensively and even look at the depth of that area, is 200 feet might not be enough for some of the uses depending on the zoning you go with. And we just have not considered that yet. So, I mean, it's obviously up to the Plan Commission to make that recommendation, but any kind of answers we give you right now would be really knee jerk and on the fly.
So I mean, we're looking, the request is to change us to C1 and now we're saying R3. I mean, I guess I don't want to assume, but you guys have looked through what other zonings are appropriate and you felt that C1 was the most appropriate for this area, correct?
The applicant had proposed C1 over the whole of the parcel. The only reason R3 is in play is because that buffer area is already R3. So we just thought to leave it for now. But then what they're requesting is to take that buffer piece and do it as OR, which may work, may not. It kind of depends, you know, but I mean, it was definitely part of our conversation. We just haven't looked at it completely at that point. Mostly just because, again, it's kind of a question mark. Anything could happen on that large piece of property once they break off for those other two commercial uses.
I guess my point being is if we're trying to protect against a large residential development, we need to take it down to like an R2, not leave it as an R3 or an OC or NC, which allows multifamily residential. So let's say if we're trying to protect against something, let's at least do it and not do this thing that doesn't really accomplish anything, is what I'm getting at.
I'm not particularly eager to protect against multifamily. I'm thinking of townhouse kinds of situations and other things that would address our need for more housing. My first thought was to go with the staff recommendation, which was let's see what kinds of possibilities come up before we worry about the zoning. But I'm thinking that the OR has the advantage that it acknowledges that we're going to be going in a more commercial direction, which is in the comprehensive plan. But it also yokes it to residential and is the least intensive of the commercial possibilities. And I think that might be a preferable thing as far as encouraging an appropriate level of commercial development there.
Sid, I did not know how to word that, but you worded that perfectly.
Thank you.
That's why we keep sit around.
Seriously, it was like you channeled everything that I was thinking as a mess up here, and you said it into words that made sense. So
You did a good job of channeling then, Ken. Thank you for raising the issue. So I am willing to support the amendment, but I think it might be best to vote separately on that apart from the whole proposal. If you see what I mean, Ken?
Yeah, I see. Okay, so Steph, can you put that map up with that the 200-foot area? And I am really having problems with this. I apologize. So we are trying to do C1 along that whole section. What we are talking about with the R3 versus the NC versus the RR is the yellow, right? Okay, good. Sorry, I don't know why that was, because it's not written down on the paper in front of me. Okay.
The staff
So-
recommendation is written as this. So instead of it, which will remain varied density, it would read, which will become office residential.
Okay,
I believe Ken's gist.
okay. Okay,
That is the motion.
okay, so that's still the motion up. Do we need a separate motion to change that portion? No, we just vote on it with the amendment as it is. Okay. All right, so the motion is by Commissioner Ravinsky with a second by, is it Commissioner Bremer?
No,
Mr. Daniels, I believe.
Daniel.
Do we not have a second?
No, Daniels.
Oh, sorry.
EJ.
Commissioner Dan- Okay. To take the recommendation for C1, but then changing that 200-foot buffer to OR. Correct? Okay, so that is the motion on the table. Is there any further discussion or any questions for staff? Okay.
I just want to just say that I haven't had the opportunity to discuss any of this with those individuals I just heard may have issues with this. So we will have a kick at the cat at Common Council, I would assume, on this. So I'm just offering that to those who are listening outside. If this gets approved, it still has to be confirmed, and I will be listening between now and then for any comments.
And I believe, if I'm correct, there are 2 more public hearings on this as well.
One more public hearing. We do one. No, it just has 2 readings at Common Council.
Yes.
I do
Okay.
appreciate kicking the can rather than kicking the cat, by the way. Although I just think that my cat was getting really nervous.
Yeah, good.
Okay, all right, so motion by Commissioner Ravinsky, second by Commissioner Daniels. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then that first reading will go then ahead to the Common Council for August 2nd. Okay. All right. Moving on to item number 5, which is a public hearing on request to amend text in chapter 4, article number section 44-1747, uncovered parking in residential districts.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I'm just I'll be really brief with the public hearing portion of this. We are reintroducing some language that basically a Scribner's error had removed from the last parking code update. And I'll get more into detail at the action item.
All right, so with this public hearing, we're looking to hear from anyone who's in favor, in opposition, or looking to provide information only. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Let the record reflect that no one came forward and this public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item number 6, consideration with possible action on request to amend text within chapter 44, article 18, section 44-1747, uncovered parking in residential districts.
Correct. So what you have in your packets is the ordinance that was approved last year, which was a 18-month update to the whole parking code rewrite, which we did in 2019. As we went through that process of going through it, I am not actually sure how it happened, if it was a graphic that covered up some verbiage or the verbiage got deleted or what happened. But 3 provisions of the single and 2 family residential parking code were omitted in the general ordinances that went on to council. So those got to council, they have been adopted. Somebody came in to do some work that those sections were relevant to, and obviously could not do it because they were no longer in the code. So this is truly a cleanup. I'm gonna kind of jump, and I'll take the blame. I don't know whose blame it is, but I'll take it. And so in the residential parking sections for single and 2 family, there's a lot of language in there. You know, you have to have a garage, your driveway can be this wide, all of that kind of stuff. These 3 top code provisions are the ones that were deleted. One was that you can have no more than 4 uncovered parking spaces per unit on your lot. And this is you know, kind of goes with this image or this image. The spaces may be located in the rear yard, 2.5 feet from the lot lines. And then the third one, C, is the 1 space that's permitted next to your garage. Again, with the 2.5 foot setback. So these are the 2 provisions. This graphic remained in the code, but all this language was gone. So what happened is it basically got rid of A, B, and C, renumbered D, E, and F to A, B, and C. And this no longer was permitted in the city. So we get a lot of these side garage parking stalls, not a lot of the backyard parking lots, a few, but not too many. But this one is really kind of like the hardship, is the big hardship. Quite a few people put a space next to their garage. If you remember, we did adjust these. We removed the screening requirement. If you remember that, you can see in the images it required bushes or fencing. That was removed in 2019, and whatever happened, all of it was removed. So I'll stop sharing, but you have the original 19 code, I think it was. And then just the one that would be going forward to council, adding those 3 items back in and renumbering the second 3. So very simple. But yes, and it did take that long before somebody came in and caught it. I wanted to put a parking stall, summer, right?
All right, thanks, Dave. Any discussion?
No, move to approve.
Second, I'm all for correcting mistakes.
Thanks, Sid.
It's a motion by Vice Chair Miller, second by Commissioner Bremer. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead with a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and then that will move forward then to Common Council for August 2nd. Moving on to informational director's report. Mr. Stick-Schulte.
Good evening, commissioners. It looks like we're actually going to get out of here by 7 o'clock tonight. So enjoy. And actually looks like the rain's quitting. So maybe you actually get to do something nice here the rest of your evening. I will be brief. If you're wondering why Mr. Leroy has been on this call and not represented a client here tonight, that's because he is officially our new zoning administrator. He has started his first day on the job here today. So he's replacing Mr. Newmeyer, who is going to be heavily missed, but we're excited to have on. John is obviously a very qualified, certainly very familiar with Green Bay and very familiar with the Plan Commission's procedures. So we're happy to welcome him aboard. Hopefully you'll be seeing all kinds of him really at upcoming meetings. So look forward to seeing his face and providing some reports very, very soon. So we're excited to have him on board. A couple of other items. Staff is preparing it's TIF creation time of year. So we're actually working at creating 2 new TIF districts, one for the Grandview Industrial Park, The other one is actually for our 222 Cherry Street project area downtown here. So those are the two. We're actually keeping those districts relatively smaller with kind of the economy being what it is, a little bit of the uncertainty, not sure exactly where property values are going to go and wanting to kind of be a little bit more conservative with those types of districts. We're also going to be doing a couple of amendments to, I believe, TID 4 and TID 12 to allow us to make allocation of positive increment to the shipyard district to use some of the positive revenues that are available in those districts to help pay for some of our shipyard improvements. And then we're also looking at kind of identifying some new infrastructure costs, particularly stormwater in TID 10. And that's the Main and Mason area, which we know there's always been some flooding and other issues in that immediate area. So kind of started that process. We've had our initial meeting with the Joint Review Board, the next meeting of the RDA, and actually the August 9th meeting of the RDA will actually be reviewing, hopefully coming to the public hearing for all of those districts. So we're looking forward to getting those going. Staff continues to work on the green infrastructure code updates. Folks, remember, obviously you guys spent some time looking at some of those. We have had a couple of really very productive meetings, I think, with the Builders Association, reviewing a lot of the information there. Dave especially has taken a good lead on doing a lot of that work, in addition with Director Grenier and Public Works. So it's kind of just wading through and making sure that what we're proposing is actually, we're able to implement it reasonably and actually get the results we're looking for on those things. Some things are meant to be very positive for stormwater. Some things are meant to be more positive for aesthetics, but we're making sure we're trying to balance what can actually be done and put forward and will likely be maintained over time. And Dave, I saw clicked off if he has any other comments he would like to make on this.
Well, I was going to comment that it's mainly on the landscaping section and the parking lot landscaping section. All the other sections for the green infrastructure went through council and were approved. I think they were approved. They might still have one reading. But it's really the landscape section of our code. Significant ones are like the number of islands, the size of the soils that need to be under the ground, setbacks, that kind of stuff.
So that will be coming back here. We're not certainly in a rush to do that. We want to make sure we've actually got something that's been fully vetted by staff, by our staff as well at the end of the day. Certainly the consultant who had made recommendations is on there, but at the end of the day, it needs to work with the rest of our code in terms of other sections and so forth. So going to be counting on staff to kind of carry that ball across the goal line here shortly. I guess one last item, we've completed our RFP for the JBS redevelopment site over on Lime Kiln Road. That's getting ready to go out the door and hopefully start soliciting some development proposals for that particular site. Been a lot of public engagement and a lot of work done by staff behind the scenes on that one. A lot more to go, obviously. We're excited to get that to point and hopefully going to be seeing some specific proposals on presenting concept plans for how that site may actually be built out. So obviously, this body will certainly be involved in that as we come through and want to be having kind of run those ideas through folks as we get to hopefully implementation of an actual project on that site. So, and with that, they'll probably there'll be in the next day or so be an email of just a general update of other economic development projects that'll pop up in your email box. So just please take a look at that and let me know if you have any other specific questions when it arrives.
I do have one very specific question. As Lisa was going through the language that we need to use at the beginning of the public hearing, it occurred to me to wonder if we publish those public notices in the Press Times as well as the Press Gazette now.
Actually, our official paper is the Press Times now, Commissioner Bremer. So we that has presented some interesting challenges from a staff standpoint as a weekly paper versus a daily.
Right.
We have adjusted our internal procedures to make that match. But yeah, right now we primarily just do the Press Times as our official paper, and then obviously through our website and other things as appropriate. But certainly will probably be. I think Alder Hutchinson might have, if he remembers the vote, they made a very good financial offer to the city in terms of cost. It was a very competitive position on that, so it was why it was being considered. Certainly staff selfishly, we like to have the daily because it offers us a little bit more flexibility in our notices and getting things published. But certainly it meets all the statutory requirements for the official paper. So we really are kind of giving them a test run, I think, this year and seeing how that's going to work. So
Thank you.
And with that, that's all I have if there's no other questions.
All right, well, thank you so much, Neil. All right, looks like the date of the next meeting is July 25th, 2022.
So I move we adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Bremer and a second by Commissioner Ravinsky to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any? All right, good night, everyone.
Enjoy a summer evening in Green Bay.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah.